When the rescue boat reached the island, its engine was still humming, but every person who'd ridden it was gone. The fog was thick enough to swallow light. The air smelled of burnt wood and river salt, and something about the silence felt aware. Locals called it Hollow's Rest, a small unmarked island in Pennsylvania where no birds land and no maps point anymore. That night, 3 young filmmakers disappeared after sending one final message. "We're not alone out here." What investigators found the next morning would change how the state handled missing persons forever. But the strangest part? The only voice left on the tape wasn't human. When the rescue boat reached the island, its engine was still humming, but the 3 people who had boarded it hours earlier were nowhere to be found. The officer on duty said the air felt wrong. Not cold, just heavy, as if the island itself was holding its breath. The boat drifted in a slow circle near the muddy shoreline, the spotlight sweeping through the fog like a blade. Every sound echoed back twice, once through the mist, and again from something deeper, something that didn't belong. They called it Hollow's Rest, a patch of land no bigger than a football field, floating on the Susquehanna River, just outside Lancaster County. Old maps listed under another name, Graves Isle. But at some point in the late 1970s, every record of it vanished from state archives. It wasn't always cursed. In 1912, Hollow's Rest was home to the Riverside Sanitarium, a small psychiatric facility meant to house unfit patients from nearby towns. Reports say it caught fire one winter night after the boiler exploded. 26 patients and 1 nurse, Alyssa Graves, died before help could reach them. Locals say she refused to leave the building, dragging patients through the smoke until the ceiling collapsed. The fire burned so intensely that even the soil fused to glass in places. Afterward, the island was abandoned. No rebuilding, no investigation, just a fence on the mainland and a warning. Don't go near the water after dark. That warning turned into folklore. Teenagers told stories of lights flickering in the fog, of voices calling their names. But the modern generation never believed in ghosts. They believed in content. Mark Givens, Daniel Price, and Alyssa Reed, 3 friends from Scranton, ran a small YouTube channel focused on abandoned places. They filmed half-collapsed churches, Cold War bunkers, forgotten rail tunnels, anything eerie enough to trigger a thumbnail. When they heard about the island, they thought they'd struck gold. Haunted Island in Pennsylvania, the title alone could pull 500,000 views. They arrived on October 11th, 2022, just before sunset. The temperature dropped faster than expected. The sky tinted copper behind the trees. On their camera, you can hear Daniel laughing as the boat cuts through the current. "This is it," he says, "the lost asylum of Hollow's Rest." Mark pans toward Alyssa. She smiles nervously, clutching the mic like she's already regretting this trip. The footage is raw, shaky, but you can feel how real it is. They weren't thrill seekers. They were normal people chasing a story, and that's what makes it worse. The first few clips show nothing strange, just an overgrown dock, a rusted gate, and the crumbled foundation of what used to be the sanitarium's main hall. The place looks almost peaceful under twilight, ivy creeping through stone, soft wind in the leaves. Then the sun disappears, and the tone shifts. The last clip they uploaded shows Daniel aiming his flashlight toward a cluster of trees. The beam hits something metallic, maybe a sign, maybe a door. Then the camera tilts. A woman's voice murmurs, faint but clear. "Help me?" Alyssa whispers, "Did you hear that?" The footage cuts to black. At 12:47 a.m., Mark radioed the mainland ranger station. His voice was frantic. "We found something. There's someone down here." That's the last transmission anyone received. The line stayed open for 6 minutes. No words, just what sounded like running water and distant knocking, like fists against a wall. When officers arrived at dawn, They expected to find an overturned boat. Instead, they found everything neatly in place. Camera tripod standing upright, supplies untouched, backpacks zipped. The only sign of movement was a single set of footprints leading from the dock to the forest and stopping halfway. Investigators treated it as a drowning case. No signs of foul play, no bodies recovered, just an accident, they said. But one diver refused to go back after surfacing the first time. He claimed he saw a woman standing at the bottom, eyes open, hair floating upward like smoke. Others dismissed it as panic or nitrogen narcosis, but his description matched Nurse Alyssa Graves exactly, the same woman from 1912 whose name shared eerie resemblance with the missing girl. 2 days later, a fisherman's dash cam recorded something strange. A dim orange glow on the island's center, pulsing rhythmically, like the heartbeat of a fire that should have died a century ago. The state police seized the footage, citing ongoing investigation. Reporters tried to dig deeper, but any file related to Hollow's rest was classified within a week. Even search and rescue logs were locked. It was as if someone wanted the island erased again. And for a while, it worked, until one of Mark's backup cameras washed ashore 3 miles downstream. The memory card survived. The first minute showed them laughing, setting up camp. The next 15 minutes are silent. No talking, no movement, just the camera tilted toward the trees. Then faintly, you can hear breathing, close, shallow, human, but none of them are in the frame. The last sound is Alyssa's voice whispering, "It's not the wind." Then the screen fills with static and ends. Police labeled it interference. Locals didn't buy it. Old men who lived by the river said the same thing happens every few decades. People vanish, the fog thickens, and the river grows restless. They say Hollow's rest doesn't take lives randomly, it keeps what it remembers. And as dawn broke over the water that morning, the search team swore they heard someone calling from beneath the surface. A voice soft and distant, repeating a name the current carried away. By the time news of the disappearance spread, the story had already taken on a life of its own. TikTok clips of the leaked rescue cam footage were circulating everywhere. Flashes of fog, the half-submerged boat, and the faint outline of something moving behind the reeds. The police called it misinformation, but people had seen enough to start wondering what really happened on Hollow's rest. Reporters swarmed Lancaster County, hoping to interview the families. Mark's mother couldn't even step outside. She said every time she tried to talk about her son, her phone would glitch and replay the last voicemail he'd left. Static, then a woman's whisper saying, "Don't let it out." She thought it was a prank, until the audio engineers confirmed the file had no trace of her son's voice at all. The case officially stalled within 2 weeks. No bodies, no evidence, no leads. The river froze early that year, making further search impossible, but curiosity didn't freeze with it. A month later, a local university team offered to analyze the recovered camera and phones for signal anomalies. They expected corrupted files, maybe electromagnetic interference from the boat's engine. What they got instead was a 17-minute audio memo saved at 2:43 a.m., recorded on Alyssa Reed's phone. At first, it was only wind and footsteps crunching over gravel, the occasional click of the flashlight. Then, faintly, something like whispering children in the distance, overlapping and disjointed. The techs slowed it down and realized it wasn't children. It was one voice, repeating the same sentence over and over. "This is not your place." They never released the full tape to the public, but fragments leaked onto Reddit. Listeners described an unnatural sense of pressure, as if the sound itself made the room smaller. Some claimed their earbuds heated up mid-playback. Others said they heard a second voice layered underneath, counting down from 7. The university deleted their post within hours, but the curiosity had already mutated into obsession. Forums filled with maps, theories, satellite screenshots of the Susquehanna, and pixel-enhanced images of faint rectangular shapes under the river surface, what looked like foundations. Theories multiplied. Maybe the asylum had underground tunnels. Maybe the government used the island for experiments. Maybe the nurse's story was just a cover for something darker. Meanwhile, one ranger anonymously sent an email to a journalist at the Patriot News. It contained a single attachment, a scan of a 1913 report labeled Riverside Sanitarium Fire. Cause: unknown combustion. The last paragraph had been crossed out in pen, but under ultraviolet light, the journalist could make out part of it. It read, "Containment breach suspected. Nurse Graves initiated lockdown protocol. Do not unseal basement lockdown protocol for 1913. What were they containing? The journalist tried to publish, but her article was pulled before it went live. 2 days later, her hard drive failed. All backup files corrupted. She posted one final tweet before disappearing from social media entirely. They built over something that was never supposed to wake. That sentence alone kept Hollow's Rest trending for weeks. Then, mid-December, a small-town fisherman named Howard Dale uploaded GoPro footage that reignited everything. In the clip, he's laughing, tossing a net into calm water near the forbidden zone. Halfway through, he freezes. Behind him, the river ripples in perfect concentric circles, though there's no wind. His camera shakes, turns toward the island. Through the fog, a dim orange light flickers, same rhythmic pulse seen in the earlier dashcam video. "What the hell is that?" he mutters. The light blinks 3 times, stops, and the sound of distant screaming echoes across the water. Howard drops the camera. The file ends there. The authorities arrived within an hour. They said it was boat noise carrying through fog. But people who heard the raw clip swear the screams formed words, "Let her go." In January, search divers went back one final time under federal supervision. They found the old boiler, massive, corroded, and hollow. One of the divers later admitted off-record that they also found metal doors beneath layers of silt, welded shut from the outside. Inside, something tapped twice, slow and deliberate, like a heartbeat. The lead diver surfaced pale and trembling, whispering, "It knocked back." He refused to continue. The report filed that day was short. No recoverable remains. Site unstable. Operation terminated. By February 2023, Hollow's Rest was fenced off again, declared a restricted wildlife zone. Unmarked patrol boats began sweeping the area at night, and residents noticed the fog rolling in earlier than usual. Thicker, heavier, glowing faintly orange at the center. Some said they could hear engines running long after midnight, though no lights were visible. Others began hearing the same phrase from the leaked audio, drifting through their baby monitors and radio static. "This is not your place." Even the skeptics grew quiet. The island had taken 3 lives and left behind nothing but a whisper, and yet everyone who listened too closely swore they could feel the river watching back. When the case was officially closed, it should have been over. But a young detective named Rachel Hines couldn't let it go. She'd grown up near the Susquehanna, had heard the same bedtime stories every kid in Lancaster County knew, about the woman in white who called through fog. Most people outgrew it. Rachel didn't. When she reviewed the Hollow's Rest files, something about the dates bothered her. The island fire in 1912 had taken 27 lives, including nurse Alyssa Graves. The missing YouTubers were 3. One of them, Alyssa Reed. Same first name, same age when she vanished. 27. Coincidence, maybe. But Rachel noticed something worse. The nurse's signature on the original patient transfer forms. The ink, the handwriting, the slant, identical to the signature on a modern emergency contact form Alyssa Reed had signed when applying for her filming permit. Handwriting analysis confirmed a 96% match. Rachel requested the original sanitarium records from the state archives. The file clerk hesitated, then admitted the documents had been reclassified under environmental containment. That phrase didn't belong anywhere near an asylum fire, so she drove 2 hours to Harrisburg and found the archived microfilm copies instead. Grainy scans showed patient rosters, treatment notes, and photographs taken weeks before the blaze. In one of the photos, Nurse Graves stands behind a group of patients in white gowns. At the far left, barely in frame, there's a reflection on a window. Someone holding a camera. The model didn't exist until 1922, 10 years too early. That discovery should have been impossible, but it wasn't the only thing. When Rachel enhanced the image, she saw the figure's face. It wasn't just similar to Alyssa Reed, it was her. Same jawline, same eyes, even the same small scar above the eyebrow from a childhood accident. Rachel felt her chest tighten. Somehow, across more than a century, the same face was staring back at her. She called in a forensic anthropologist, Dr. Lester Vaughn, to compare the features. He ran facial mapping software across the recovered footage from 2022 and the 1912 photograph. The probability of identical facial markers across two individuals born a century apart, 1 in 3 billion. He told Rachel quietly, either she's her descendant, or time doesn't pass normally on that island. Meanwhile, strange interference began affecting anyone who handled the evidence. One officer reported waking to his radio turning on by itself at 2:43 a.m., replaying distorted female whispers. Another claimed his home thermostat kept switching to 27 degrees Celsius, the same number of people who died in the fire. The department dismissed it as stress. Rachel didn't. She started noticing patterns, power outages synchronized with the river's tides, flickers of orange light whenever wind crossed from east to west. On February 19th, she decided to visit Hollow's Rest herself, without authorization. She went alone, taking a small patrol boat at dusk. Her body cam footage, later leaked by a whistleblower, showed her docking on the same old pier the YouTubers used. The air was thick, visibility maybe 20 feet. She moves forward slowly, flashlight trembling across the ground. You can hear her breathing hard, trying to stay calm. At the 9-minute mark, she stops. The camera pans toward a burned-out stone arch, what used to be the asylum's entrance. Then, faintly, a figure walks across the frame. A woman in what looks like a nurse's uniform, face obscured by smoke. The flashlight flickers. Rachel whispers, "Hello?" The woman doesn't answer. She just tilts her head and gestures toward the ground. The camera shifts down. Half buried under ash is a brass name tag. The letters read, "A Graves." Rachel picks it up, whispers, "Jesus Christ." And then the feed cuts to static. When the video resumes 3 minutes later, the camera is facing the boat. She's running through the fog, panting, repeating, "She knew my name. She knew my name." The last line before the recording ends, "She said I brought her back." Rachel never returned to work after that night. She moved to another state, changed her number, refused interviews, but one reporter managed to reach her once by phone. When asked what she believed happened on Hollow's Rest, she said, "Something went wrong with time. It doesn't just hold memories, it loops them. That place replays the night of the fire over and over, looking for someone who'll finish what she started." Then she hung up. A week later, a fisherman near the island found another camera lens washed ashore. Etched into the glass by corrosion were 3 words that hadn't been there before: "Help her leave." After the leaked body cam footage, Hollow's Rest should have been permanently sealed. But it wasn't. Instead, a private research group called Atlas Phenomena Institute quietly obtained temporary access to the site under the guise of an environmental safety audit. Their official purpose? To assess residual contaminants from the 1912 fire. Unofficially, they wanted to prove the paranormal theories wrong. The team consisted of 6 people, 2 environmental engineers, a geologist, a historian, and 2 field technicians. Their leader, Dr. Malcolm Rourke, was a calm, rational man who'd spent years debunking haunted site myths. "Everything has a reason," he told the press before the trip, and that island will be no exception. They landed at sunrise, late March 2023. Cameras rolled from the moment their boots touched the ground. The footage shows wind stirring through the burned trees, soft mist curling between the ruins. It's quiet, too quiet. The team's metal detectors pinged immediately, not on the surface, but deep underground, near the center of the island where the sanitarium once stood. Beneath the ash and collapsed brick, they detected a large hollow structure roughly 12 feet down. The readings suggested reinforced steel walls, odd for a building constructed in the early 1900s. By noon, they began digging. Every few feet, the ground temperature dropped unnaturally. Their instruments recorded electromagnetic spikes each time they hit metal. Then, at a depth of 10 feet, the shovel struck something solid. The crew brushed away debris to reveal a circular steel hatch, blackened by soot but still intact. The historian, Dr. Nina Carver, recognized the inscription etched along its rim, Containment Wing A, Riverside Sanitarium. She froze. "There was never a Wing A," she said. "Only the main ward and the basement infirmary." Rourke decided to continue. They pried open the hatch using hydraulic tools. A burst of stale air escaped, thick, cold, and sweet, like decayed flowers. Their flashlights caught a staircase descending into complete darkness. The steps were wet, coated in soot and something that glistened faintly, like oil. Cameras flickered but didn't die. Every few seconds, the mics picked up what sounded like breathing behind them, but no one turned around. At the bottom, they reached a corridor. Narrow, metallic, lined with numbered doors. Each door had a small glass window covered from the inside with black residue. "Containment cells," Nina whispered. On the walls, faded symbols had been painted, circles intersected by lines, repeating over and over like a pattern meant to trap something in. They moved deeper until they reached a heavy door labeled Ward 0. Its hinges were fused shut. Dr. Rourke's voice trembled slightly as he said, "This wasn't built for patients. This was built for keeping something here." They set up a motion-triggered camera facing the door and prepared to leave, but before they could ascend, a low metallic bang echoed through the hall, slow, rhythmic, like something inside the door was responding to their presence. The sensors spiked. Temperature dropped below freezing. The footage shows condensation forming on their breath, even though the air temperature outside was 60 degrees. Then one of the technicians, Aaron, whispered, "It's knocking back." Rourke ordered evacuation. As they climbed the stairs, lights flickered. The geologist screamed, pointing at the tunnel wall, handprints forming in the condensation, pressing outward as if someone were inside the concrete. They reached the surface and sealed the hatch. Within an hour, they were gone. The next morning, Atlas issued a statement. "No significant findings. Site deemed unstable." The footage vanished. Every member signed NDAS, but one clip leaked. 90 seconds of raw footage from a body-mounted camera. It shows the corridor again, empty, the motion sensor blinking red. The door labeled Ward 0 begins to shift, metal groaning. Then a woman's voice whispers clearly, "You brought them back." The clip ends there. Analysts later confirmed the voice was female, matching nurse Alyssa Graves's spectral frequency from the 1912 phonograph archives used in early asylum training recordings. Somehow her voice pattern survived across mediums a century apart. Weeks later, a storm swept through Lancaster County, flooding the lower riverbanks. When the water receded, locals found black residue along the shoreline, oily, metallic, almost magnetic. The Department of Environmental Protection called it industrial waste. But anyone who lived nearby could tell the difference. The smell was identical to the one in the old nurses' quarters, sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in the dark. Then came the dreams. Multiple residents reported identical nightmares, standing at the island's edge, watching fire ripple beneath the water. In every dream, A woman whispered the same words Rachel Hines had heard. "You brought her back." Something beneath Hollow's Rest had been sealed for a reason. Now it wasn't sealed anymore. After the Atlas team pulled out, Hollow's Rest went dark again. The government fenced off the riverbank within 24 hours. New signs appeared overnight. Federal property, no entry, no explanation. Locals noticed more patrol boats on the water, unmarked, their floodlights cutting through the fog every night around 2 a.m. At first, people assumed the operation was cleanup. Then came the sound. Every few nights, a low hum rolled off the island, like a generator buried deep underground. It started faint, but by mid-April, you could feel it in your chest, standing near the shore. Dogs refused to go near the water. Fishermen said their compasses spun in circles. The hum always began at 2:43 a.m., the same timestamp from Alyssa Reed's last recording. When residents started filing noise complaints, the county claimed it was construction equipment. But one retired ranger, Dale Roth, said he'd seen something that didn't match any machine. During a fog sweep, his spotlight caught a shape half submerged near the island's edge. A door, like a steel hatch, and beside it, a human hand pressed against the glass. He blinked, and it was gone. 2 days later, he quit without notice. Soon after, strange electromagnetic outages began hitting the towns nearest the river. Streetlights flickered in perfect rhythm. 7 flashes, pause, 7 flashes again. Power companies said it was grid interference. Paranormal investigators noticed the sequence matched the cadence of the countdown voice from the leaked 2:43 a.m. audio. No one wanted to admit what that meant, but everyone felt it. Something below the island was counting to something. By May, the water itself started behaving wrong. Thermal scanners showed heat signatures rising from the riverbed, warm spots moving slowly against the current, like breath under a blanket. Fish surfaced belly up, eyes clouded white. Scientists said it was a chemical bloom, though samples from the area showed no toxins, only a thin residue identical to what Atlas had documented in the tunnels. Then the dreams began spreading beyond Lancaster. People in neighboring counties, people who'd never even heard of Hollow's Rest, began emailing the local news claiming they'd seen the same image in their sleep. A burning hallway, a woman in white turning toward them, whispering a single word. Return. Psychologists blamed mass suggestion, but how do you explain the exact same imagery appearing in dozens of minds who'd never met? In June, an anonymous USB arrived at the newsroom of WHTM Harrisburg. The file inside was named Graves_protocol.mp4. The video shows a dim basement lined with sealed barrels and old signage reading Containment Wing A. The camera pans across a desk where a document lies open, dated 1913, marked Experiment Continuation. It lists test subjects by number, not name. Beside each ID is a single handwritten note, failed, reawakening unstable. At the bottom of the page, signed in fading ink, a Graves. Experts argued the footage was fake, a deep fake using historical overlays. But metadata confirmed it was filmed on a 2019 model camera, the same brand the Atlas team used. When pressed, Atlas released a short statement. All recovered materials are property of the U.S. Department of Energy. The department denied any involvement. The county began evacuating riverfront homes under the guise of flood prevention, though the forecast called for clear skies. Residents who stayed described seeing shapes moving beneath the fog, slow, human-sized ripples pacing the shoreline. One teenager live-streamed from the bridge before his feed cut out mid-sentence. His last words were, "They're standing in the water." Police later said it was a hoax, yet his phone was found days later, still streaming, battery drained to zero, but the screen glowing faintly with a frozen frame, the island burning from within. By late summer, Hollow's Rest had become more than a legend. The air patrols increased, Satellite imagery blurred, the island completely, replaced with generic river texture. News outlets moved on. The public forgot. But those who lived nearby still talk about that hum beneath the water, that whisper that crawls through static radios at night. One ranger who'd helped install the fence said something no one's been able to shake. "We sealed the door, but the ground kept breathing. And if you stand by the Susquehanna on a windless night, sometimes you'll feel it, that faint vibration underfoot, the echo of metal knocking twice, like something below waiting for someone to answer." By September, the hum finally stopped. The river went still, unnaturally still, as if the current itself had forgotten how to move. Locals said it was peaceful again, but that peace felt wrong, like the pause before an echo returns. A few of the residents who'd refused to evacuate started waking up with nosebleeds, claiming they could hear faint music coming from the island at dawn. Old church hymns played backward, blending with static. One woman swore she saw lights flickering under the water in perfect rhythm with her heartbeat. Her husband filmed it, but when he played it back, the recording contained no sound, only a single whisper right before it ended. "She's free." The government declared the site permanently restricted. Satellite images still showed nothing but smooth gray texture where Hollow's Rest should be. No vegetation, no landmarks, no sign of the buildings that once stood there. But one amateur drone pilot caught something they couldn't explain. In the brief 3 seconds before his feed was cut off, the camera showed a structure where the island used to be. A small metal tower rising from the center, with orange light pulsing at its base. Around it, the river boiled lightly, as though it was breathing. The pilot disappeared a week later while kayaking near the site. His boat was found adrift, empty, its hull covered in handprints burned into the paint, small, like a woman's. Meanwhile, Dr. Malcolm Rourke, the Atlas leader, vanished from public life. His colleagues claimed he'd suffered a breakdown, but an encrypted email later surfaced on a conspiracy forum, traced to his old account. It read, "The containment isn't about ghosts. It's about memory. That place isn't haunted because people died there. It's haunted because it remembers dying." For the first time since the story began, even skeptics started asking questions. If Hollow's Rest was erased from maps, how did boats still avoid its coordinates? How did radio frequencies still distort near that section of the river? Why did a single old lighthouse downstream start flashing in a 7-beat pattern? The same rhythm from Alyssa's last audio file. Every attempt to rationalize it only twisted the fear tighter. Maybe the island wasn't destroyed at all. Maybe it had just sunk, waiting. Rachel Hines, the detective who'd once visited Hollow's Rest, was found living alone in rural Maine, her house filled with boxes of documents, photos, and river maps. When a journalist finally convinced her to talk, she looked hollow, exhausted. "Everyone thinks the island is gone," she said softly. "But you can't burn what's already ash. You can't drown what's already dead." When asked if she believed Alyssa Graves and Alyssa Reed were the same person, she just shook her head. Doesn't matter who she was. The island keeps making her. Then she smiled, small, broken, and said, "Don't go near water that hums." After her interview aired, several people living near the Susquehanna reported the hum returning for one night, just before a heavy fog rolled in and lingered for nearly 12 hours. The next morning, driftwood washed up along the riverbanks. Some pieces were charred, others carved with shallow, repeated words, "Let me sleep." The authorities dismissed it as vandalism. Locals didn't. And that's where the trail ends. No final answers, no closure, just a piece of land erased from every map, a handful of missing names, and a whisper that still threads through radio static on quiet nights. The mystery of Hollow's Rest remains, an open wound in Pennsylvania's history, pulsing faintly under the water, reminding anyone who listens too closely that some places never stop remembering. Because sometimes, It's not the dead haunting the living. It's the living haunting the places that refuse to die. Every ghost story starts with someone who couldn't let go of love, of guilt, of truth. But what if it's the place that can't let go of them? Hollow's Rest still breathes somewhere under that river. And if the wind ever carries the smell of burnt flowers near you, maybe it's reaching out again. Would you step onto that island if you could? Or would you turn away, even if someone you loved was still calling your name? If you dare to find out, hit subscribe, because next weekend we're going somewhere even darker.